What's up, YouTube? This is me, Asian Dave, aka Fanatical for Jesus, aka Dawei, aka David Chu. I'm coming to you real quick. I want to talk about a conversation I had with a fellow Christian. It's about the topic of free will. Now, I don't understand why Christians want to hold so dearly to this idea of free will that they want to hold to this idea so dearly, even though the Bible never once talks about humans having free will. Nowhere in the Bible does it say free will. Humans have free will to do what's pleasing to God. Man cannot do the unregenerate man is incapable of doing what's pleasing to God, and that is having faith in Jesus Christ. Man cannot do that on their own. Like Paul said, the unregenerate mind is at enmity with God, nor can he submit to God. So, this whole idea that man has free will is bogus. Now, man does have creaturely will, whereas he does what he naturally desires to do, which is to sin. That's what he naturally desires to do. And there's nothing else that he can do other than sin. Like, let me give you an analogy. Like, imagine two pies. Man has his pie, God has his pie. It's not that man and God share the same pie and man has 50% of his will and God has the other 50%. No, man has his own pie which is his own will, and God has his own pie, which is his own will. Both man and God have 100% of their own pies. Now the difference is God's pie is over man's pie, meaning God's sovereignty is over all of man's free actions. And we see this in the book of Acts when Peter tells the Jews that it was predestined for Jesus to be hung up on the cross. However, the Jews acted according with their own will and desires to kill Jesus. So there you see God's sovereignty and man's actions going together. But this doesn't mean that man has free will. It just means that man has creaturely will. If that makes sense. Um, but yeah, and then you see in Romans chapter 9 that Paul starts off in Romans chapter 9 talking about Jacob and Esau, saying how before they were born, in order that God's calling of election can be made sure, but that and be shown that it's by grace and not by works, God said that Jacob he loved and Esau he hated. And it wasn't because of anything they did, it wasn't because of any faith he foresaw in them. It was simply because of God's gracious gift. His grace. It was just based off of his grace alone. Then you see later on in Romans 9, Paul talks about how God raised up Pharaoh for the very purpose of displaying his glory and majesty and might. And that was the only purpose God raised Pharaoh up. And you see, even in the book of Exodus, over and over and over again, God said, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And at the same time, it says Pharaoh hardened his own heart. So here you see again God's sovereignty over man's, quote, will. So man is still responsible for what he does, but God is sovereign over man and everything man does. And Paul anticipates the question about, well, if this is true, then how can God judge for who can resist his will? And the only answer Paul gives to the person is, who are you to answer back to God? Can what is formed say to the potter, why did you make me like this? Like, and it's true. The potter is free to do what he wants with the lump of clay. If he wants to make one lump of clay for honorable use and another lump of clay for dishonorable use, that is his freedom. It's his freedom to decide what he wants to do. If he wants to make some people for as vessels of wrath and some people as vessels of mercy, that's on him. And I know this teaching makes Christians very uncomfortable because no one wants to think about some people being predestined to heaven or predestined to salvation and some people being predestined to hell. Not people don't want Christians don't want to think about that. I mean, shoot, unbelievers probably don't want to think about that either. The gospel is offensive to people. If the gospel isn't offensive to people, then it's not the gospel. And people need to get this idea of free will out of their head. Salvation is not something that God looked down the corridors of time and said, "Oh, I see this person coming to faith in me. I see this person making a choice to come to me, so I'm going to elect them based off of the faith that I see in them." No, God elects people first. He elected people from the beginning of creation, and then He draws them to Himself, and then gives them salvation. God, and it's not based on anything that they have done, except it is based off of God's free gift of grace. That's what it's based off of. Not based off of any foreseen faith in the believer. And it's like, I mean, God didn't have to elect anybody. He could have just left us all to our own fate and left us all to go straight to hell, and God would still be holy and just if He would have just not elected anybody and just left us all to hell. And so it's amazing that God will even elect anybody to begin with. That is an amazing thing, that God will elect anybody at all to begin with. So instead of trying to judge God for His free act of grace in electing people before the creation of the world, how about instead of judging Him, how about instead praise Him for electing you? If you're a Christian, praise Him for choosing you before the foundations of the world, because He didn't have to choose you. He could have easily just passed you by and chose someone else. So you should feel humbled and gracious that He chose you. Anyway, so that's all I have to say for now. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Alright, have a good day. God bless you. And stay awesome, Gotham. Deuces.